She didn't forget me. That's the part people always want to believe, that it was a mistake, a miscommunication, a moment of panic that got out of hand. It wasn't. My mother looked me in the eye at gate B14 of Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport, turned around, and walked away. And she never looked back. I was 16 years old. I know I said I'd tell this from the beginning, so let me back up. Because if I just start with the airport, you'll think my mother was a monster, and my stepbrother was a villain, and that the whole thing was obvious from miles away. It wasn't. That's the thing about people who hurt you slowly. They make you feel crazy for noticing. My mom remarried when I was 9. His name doesn't matter anymore, but he had a son from his first marriage. I'll call him my stepbrother, 2 years older than me, and the kind of kid who could charm the paint off a wall. Everybody loved him. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, my own grandparents. He had this way of walking into a room and making you feel like you were lucky just to be near him. I was not that kind of kid. I was quiet. I liked books. I had 2 close friends, and I was fine with that. I made decent grades, stayed out of trouble, never asked for much. Looking back, I think that was the problem. I didn't ask for much, so I didn't get much. My stepbrother asked for everything, loudly, constantly, and with the confidence of someone who had never once been told no. And so he got everything. For years, I told myself it was fine. Families aren't always perfectly equal. Parents are human. Blended families are complicated. I had a roof over my head, food on the table, clothes that fit. I wasn't being beaten or starved. So I swallowed whatever I felt and kept going. But there was this slow erosion that happened, year by year. My accomplishments got overlooked. My opinions got talked over. When something went wrong in the house, the assumption almost always was that I was involved. My stepbrother could point a finger at me, and my mother would nod before he even finished the sentence. I want to be fair. I don't think she meant to love me less. I just think she forgot to love me enough. The trip to Thailand was supposed to be a graduation present. My stepbrother had just finished high school, and my mom and stepdad decided the whole family would celebrate with 2 weeks abroad, Southeast Asia, which none of us had ever visited. I was 15 going on 16, and I was actually excited. I thought maybe this was it, the reset. New place, new memories, no old patterns to fall into. The first week was fine, more than fine, honestly. Bangkok was loud and hot and unlike anything I'd ever seen. My stepdad was relaxed on vacation in a way he never was at home. My mom laughed more. Even my stepbrother seemed lighter somehow, like he'd left his need to compete back in the US. I should have known it was too good to last. The second week, things shifted. My stepbrother started disappearing in the evenings. Coming back to the hotel smelling like alcohol, eyes bright and glassy, secretive in the way he got when he was doing something he knew would eventually blow up. I didn't pry. That was my first mistake. I should have paid closer attention to what he was doing, because apparently what he was doing involved me. On our second to last day, we were all getting ready to take an overnight train to Chiang Mai before flying home. We'd been running behind all morning. My stepbrother offered to carry my backpack through the market because I was buying something and didn't have a free hand. My backpack had my passport in it, my wallet, my boarding pass, everything. You know why I handed it to him? Because I still, after 7 years of being treated like an afterthought, kept believing that family didn't actually mean you harm. I kept believing that whatever his flaws were, he wouldn't cross that line. When I turned around 5 minutes later, he was gone. I told myself he must have gone ahead. I looked through the whole market. I checked the corner where we were supposed to meet. I found my mom and stepdad at the meeting point, and my stepbrother was already there, empty-handed, and when I asked him where my bag was, he looked genuinely confused. Said I'd never handed it to him. Said I must have set it down somewhere. Said I was always doing stuff like this. My mother believed him immediately. I'm not exaggerating. There was no deliberation. No, let's all think about this. She just pivoted toward his version of events, and I watched her eyes do that thing they always did, that subtle shift where I became the problem. We spent 2 hours retracing steps. My bag was gone, my passport was gone, everything. That's when things got worse. We were supposed to leave for the airport in 3 hours. My stepdad started talking logistics. Could we get an emergency travel document in time? Would the embassy help? How long would a replacement passport take? And while he was figuring that out, my stepbrother pulled my mother aside. I wasn't supposed to hear what he said. But I did. He told her I'd been stealing from his room the night before, that he'd seen me going through his things, that I'd taken some cash he'd been keeping in his bag. It was a lie, a complete, deliberate, cold-blooded lie. I hadn't been anywhere near his room, but the way my mother's face changed, that's what I'll never forget. She didn't look at me with suspicion. She looked at me with a kind of tired disappointment, like she'd been waiting for this, like it confirmed something she'd suspected all along. And then she started moving differently, faster, more purposeful. She made a phone call, had a conversation I wasn't part of, and when my stepdad came back, they exchanged a look, and something silent passed between them. They told me they were going to get help, that I should wait right there, near the information desk in the terminal we'd moved to, and they would be back in 20 minutes. They did not come back in 20 minutes. I waited for 2 hours. I borrowed a phone from a woman at the information desk and tried calling my mom's cell. No answer. Tried again. No answer. The woman behind the desk could see I was starting to panic. She was kind. She stayed with me while I tried to figure out what to do, and then a man approached. He was maybe 50, American, traveling for work, wearing the look of someone who had seen enough of the world to not be easily rattled. He'd been watching the whole thing unfold from a row of seats nearby. He'd heard me trying to make calls. He walked over and asked, very simply, if I needed help. I don't know why I told him everything. Maybe because he asked. Maybe because I hadn't eaten since that morning, and I was running on empty, and sometimes your body just decides it's done pretending. He listened to the whole story without interrupting. And then he said something I didn't expect. He said, I think your family just boarded their flight. I went completely still. He'd seen them, my mother, my stepdad, and my stepbrother, moving through the terminal about 40 minutes earlier, toward the gates. He hadn't said anything at the time because he'd assumed they were coming back, that maybe they'd split up to handle things. But the more he heard me talk, the more he realized what had actually happened. My family had left me in a foreign country. No passport, no money, no phone, no plan. The man, I'll call him my guardian angel because honestly that's what he was, sat down with me and started making calls. He knew people. He'd traveled enough to know exactly who to contact and what to say. Within an hour, we were talking to the USS Embassy's emergency line. Within 2 hours, a consular officer had been looped in. Within 3 hours, Thai immigration authorities were involved, and so were American officials, because it turns out that leaving a minor stranded abroad without documentation is not a small thing. It is, in fact, a very serious thing. Internationally, my stepbrother's phone, it turned out, had been his undoing. He'd been texting a friend the whole time. Bragging, actually, in the way that some people brag when they think consequences are for other people. The texts were detailed. The theft of my bag, the lie about the stealing, the plan to get me left behind so that a trust fund my biological father had set up in my name, one that my stepbrother had somehow found out about, would be delayed or complicated, or somehow redirected if I was out of the picture long enough. I hadn't even known about the trust fund. When the embassy contacted my family's flight, which had not yet landed, and informed the airline of an ongoing international matter involving a minor, my stepbrother's phone was flagged and examined at the gate before he could disembark. The texts were right there, all of it, laid out in his own words. My mother, according to what the consular officer later told me, had gone pale when they were pulled aside. My stepdad, to his credit, looked genuinely horrified. I don't think he'd known the full plan. I think my stepbrother had fed him the same story he'd fed my mother, and my stepdad had believed it too. My mother had known more than she let on. She had chosen, when it came down to it, to believe her stepson over her own daughter, and to act on that belief in a way that left me alone and undocumented in Southeast Asia at 16 years old. That was going to be very hard to explain to anyone. While all of this was unraveling, I was sitting in a quiet room at a bottle of water and a plate of crackers that someone had brought me, and I was trying to make sense of the fact that my life could have gone in a completely different direction. If my guardian angel hadn't been paying attention, if the woman at the information desk hadn't been kind, if I hadn't said anything to anyone and just sat there, frozen, waiting for people who were never coming back. A lot of things could have happened to a 16-year-old girl alone in an international airport with no documentation and no money and no one looking for her. I knew that. I'd watched enough news to know that, and the consular officer, when she sat down with me, said it quietly but clearly. "We are very glad you were found by someone safe." I spent 2 nights in Bangkok before a temporary travel document was arranged and I could fly home. My guardian angel checked me into a hotel near the embassy, put it on his own card, and said not to worry about it. He gave me his contact information. He told me that if I needed anything, or if anyone needed to reach him for any legal reason, I should share it freely. I did share it freely. My stepbrother was charged. It took several months and more conversations with more officials than I can remember, but the charges were real. Real. Theft. My bag and its contents had been recovered from a locker in the market, which the texts had confirmed he'd set up himself. Fraud. And, more seriously, contributing to the abandonment of a minor in a foreign country, which carries a different weight when the minor had no means of safety or return. He did not go to prison. I want to be honest about that. The sentence was community service, probation, and a record that will follow him for a long time. I won't pretend I wasn't angry that it wasn't more. I was. I spent a long time being angry about that. My mother's situation was more complicated. She hadn't been the one to steal my bag. She hadn't sent the texts. What she had done was make a choice, a conscious, deliberate choice, to board a plane and leave her daughter behind based on a story she wanted to believe, because believing it was easier than protecting me. The family court system had opinions about that. She was required to complete parenting classes, and for a period, my living arrangement was reviewed. I ended up moving in with my biological father's sister, my aunt, who I'd always been close to but never lived with. That turned out to be the best thing that ever happened to me. I need to say something about the trust fund, because it mattered. My biological father, who passed away when I was 7, had set up a modest fund in my name. It wasn't enormous, but it was mine, and it was meant for my education. My stepbrother had discovered it through some documents he'd gone through, probably not for the first time, and had convinced himself that if he could create enough chaos around me, complicate my legal standing, maybe redirect attention during a vulnerable moment, he could find a way to benefit. The details of how he planned to do it were never fully coherent, honestly. Greed doesn't always make sense. But the intent was clear. The fund was protected. I used it for college. The aunt I moved in with was steady in a way I hadn't known a home could be. Dinner, at the same time every night, a room that was mine. People who asked about my day and actually listened to the answer. I hadn't realized how much I'd been running on fumes until I finally wasn't. You don't know what you've been missing until someone gives it to you and your whole body exhales. I graduated high school with honors. I went to college in state. I studied communications, which probably isn't surprising given that I'd spent a long time watching what happens when people don't communicate, or communicate badly, or communicate only the version of the truth that serves them. I don't talk to my stepbrother. I don't say that with anger anymore. It's just a fact. There are people in this world who will look at you and see only what they can take. My stepbrother was one of those people, and recognizing that, finally, completely, was its own kind of freedom. My relationship with my mother is complicated. That's the honest answer. We are not close. We speak occasionally. She has never apologized in a way that felt real. I mean the kind of apology where someone actually recounts what they did and names it and takes responsibility for it. What I get instead are vague expressions of regret, references to how hard things were, comments about how my stepbrother manipulated her too. But she was my mother, and I was 16. And she got on that plane. I went to therapy. I want to say that plainly. because I think people sometimes treat it like a confession of weakness. And it isn't. It's just how I learned to live in a body that had been through something. My therapist helped me understand the difference between forgiving someone and accepting what they did. Between understanding why someone behaved the way they did and deciding they deserve another chance. I had confused those things for years. When I think about Bangkok now, I think about the light. It sounds strange, but the morning I left for the airport to finally fly home, my guardian angel drove me there himself. And I watched the city wake up through the car window, monks in saffron, street carts with steam rising, motor scooters weaving through intersections, and I thought, I survived this. Not just the night in the terminal, all of it. Years of being the one who got left behind, who got blamed, who got passed over. And then this, the most literal version of all of it. And I survived this too. I'm 30 now. I have a job I like, an apartment with plants I actually managed to keep alive, friends who have known me long enough to call me out when I'm being ridiculous. I have a life that is mine in the way that matters, chosen, built, tended to. There is a version of me who might have sat in that Bangkok terminal until something terrible happened. I think about her sometimes. I'm grateful every single day that I'm not her. If you're the invisible kid in your family, the one who gets overlooked, who gets blamed first, who has learned to make yourself small so there's less to criticize, I want you to know that I see you, and I want you to hear this clearly. The fact that they couldn't see your worth does not mean it isn't there. It just means they weren't looking. Some people are too busy looking elsewhere to ever notice what they already have. I was left behind. And then I built a life so full that I don't have room to regret it.